Lothern Blue. This will be our second layer on top of the meganobz armor. This one is also considered the highlight layer, and you can go ahead and imagine this with the fine detail brush. This is a very good brush for all the little hard to reach places and all your best highlights. It's a very dainty brush, so you want to be careful with it and make sure you learn how to use it and how to take care of it, because if you do not, it will go to waste and you will ruin a fine detail brush, which you do not want to do. So as you're painting with a fine detail brush, you want to go ahead and just paint on the edges here, making sure that you make the brightest points closer to the corners. And as you get farther away from the corners, you're going to get a lighter touch and fade a little bit away. And it's just some last details here, like the little eye scope that he's got there. Basically all there is to it, folks. You don't want to go too crazy and try to base your entire model with this fine detail brush. It is not for that. Dragonhof Nightshade. And we're going to be using a fluffier brush for this, so it's nice and soft, and you can lather up a lot of wash on the brush as such. Washes are painted a little bit differently. You don't actually need to mix them with any water. They're already liquidy enough. But be careful, though, of pooling, because some of the new washes will tend to stick in one spot more than the others. Like on these flat surfaces here on the meganob, I'm going to be brushing them away towards the crevices that I want them to go to. And once you have that done, you can just let it sit to dry, and this is probably just the most painful part of the washes, which isn't that bad at all. If anything, it just gives you a little bit of a break, and it'll be pretty dark after this, because this Drakenhof is a very dark, heavy wash, and it almost brings us back to square one, but you can see there's still little highlight details, which we're going to go back and bring out with dry brushing of Lothern Blue and a Lightalk Blue. First we're going with the Lightalk Blue, Lightalk. First we're going to be going with the Lightalk Blue and doing a little bit of a dry brushing action. It's going to be a little bit of a heavier dry brush than the Lothern Blue, just so we can get a nice gradient there. What I'm doing here is just lightly brushing the edges, so we can build up to the final color that we want. And for some of the parts, you're going to have to put a little bit more pressure to get the paint that you want on there, but it's going to make a nice edge highlight, just like we did with the fine detail brush earlier. Next up, we're going to be dry brushing with Lothern Blue. This one is going to be a little bit lighter of a dry brush, just so we can make those ever so bright highlights that much more valuable. And with this, I'm going to be building up gradually instead of pushing hard onto the model like I did last time. We're going to be just building it up, brushing lightly on top of the edges, and then it'll just gradually build up, and you'll notice it won't make much difference at first, but the more layers you put on top, you'll start to see the difference. It'll just brighten it up a little bit on the edges. Now we're going to be painting with an older color of Citadel Chainmail. I'm using a crappier brush for this one because my other dry brush is actually wet now because I cleaned it off, and it is drying. The same thing that we did for the Lothern Blue, we're just going to be dry brushing all the black parts that are metallic, so it looks like they are really worn down old metal stuff. And we're actually going to be weathering them down more so in later videos. with other techniques, this is just the beginning of the metal part for this model. And after a good layer of the chainmail, I'm going to go to Necron Compound, which is one of the new paints of the dry paints. They actually work very nicely, and you don't have to get too much paint off of the brush. They're practically already in dry brush form. You just got to brush it off a little bit, and you're good to go. And this one's a little bit lighter, so we're going to make the metal parts stand out even more. We're going to be painting the parts that the orc forgot about to paint. The ones that he looked over so he could just get into the battle and have his colors up. I kind of imagine the mech boys to be the ones to paint the armor for the meganobz. I can't imagine the meganobz wanting to paint themselves, being as clunky as they are. Now for the orc skin. This part is actually one of my favorite parts of painting orcs, the skin. A simple 3-step mechanism where we'll be using Gnarlot Green, which is an older paint. Gnarlot Green will be good for now. You just want to use a darker green for this meganob because he's a veteran. He's been around a while, he's survived a lot of battles, and he's been able to fight a lot, so I'm assuming he is darker. He's not as big as regular knobs, but he's still a veteran, so I assume he'll be just as dark as any knob out there. So once we get our base here, you're going to want to use a 1-to-1 ratio again, just the same as any other color. And just go ahead and base the skin of the face. Unfortunately, there's not much to be painting here with the skin. There's just the head, the arm parts that are sticking out of his armor, and his latissimus dorsi that are poking out from the side armor. Next, I'll be painting the teeth of the orc. The base color I'll be using is Steel Legion Drab, and the layer color will be Ushabti Bone. I'll be using a kind of smaller detail brush, not quite the fine detail brush, because this one will do fine. And this Steel Legion Drab is a good color for the orc teeth because I imagine that they don't brush their teeth much. All they really care about is fighting, so they don't have time to do any of that. So this brown color will make a perfect base for their rotting teeth. I also enjoy the fact that they use their teeth as currency, and that would make even more sense for them to have rotten, just about to fall out teeth. Now with the fine detail brush, I'm going to be going over the top parts with the Ushabti Bone. And you want to be pretty careful here, just so you don't mess up or get any of the paint on the skin, but it is okay if you do, because I do that here. Just now I have a little bit too much water and I get the paint on the lip parts. But you don't need to fret, because all you need to do to fix this is get a dry brush, a clean dry brush, and go over the same spot, and it'll suck up all the water. And if there is not water in there, in the paint solution that you have spilled on the model, all you need to do is add your own water to it, and you can just brush it away. As long as the new brush that you use is clean. Don't use the brush that has paint on it. There you go, you have your teeth done, and from here, what you would want to do is add a wash of Seraphim Sepia. Unfortunately, I don't have time to do it in this video, but I'm going to move on to the highlight of the skin. This layer is called Elysian Green. It is a brighter version of Narlock Green, and with this you're just going to go on the raised areas with a fine detail brush. You could use a bigger brush, but I'm going to be using a fine detail brush to cover the raised areas on the orc face with all his veins and his wrinkles that he has. And there you have it. I'm done with all the painting of the skin. From there, all you'd want to do is add maybe a wash if you want. And I'll see you in the next video for extra tidbits on damage, rust, more metal bits, and even the checks.